Book of Heaven, Volume 1, Part 3. So this hard trial, though I don't remember too well, lasted for 3 years. However, there were days or weeks of interval. It is not that they would cease completely, but they began to mitigate. I remember that after one communion, the Lord taught me what to do in order to put them to flight. And this was to despise them and not to bother about them at all, and to consider them as if they were as many ants. I felt so much strength being infused in me that I no longer felt that fear of before, and I would act in this way. When they made clamors and noise, I would say to them, "It shows that you have nothing to do, and that in order to spend time, you are doing so many silly things. Go ahead, do them, for when you get tired, you will stop it." Sometimes they would stop. Other times they would get so angry and would make greater noise. I felt them near me, making themselves stronger and doing violence to themselves in order to take me away. I smelled the horrible stench and felt the heat of the fire. It is true that in my interior I felt a certain shiver, but I would pluck up strength and say to them, "Liars that you are, if this were true, you would have done it from the first day. But since it is false, and you have no power over me but that which is given to you from above, go ahead, keep singing, and then when you get tired, you will croak." If then they sent out laments and shouts, I would say to them, "What is this? You could not add to the accounts today?" That is, have some souls been taken away from you that you lament? Poor ones, they don't feel well, but I too want to make you lament a little bit more. And I would begin to pray for sinners, or to do acts of reparation. Sometimes I would laugh when they started to do the usual things, and I would say to them, "How can I fear you, cowardly species? If you were serious beings, you would not have done so many silly things. Don't you yourselves feel ashamed? Don't you let yourselves be made fun of?" If then they tempted me with blasphemies or hatred against God, I would offer him that most bitter pain, that violence I made to myself in seeing that, while the Lord deserved all the love, all the praises, I was forced to do the opposite, in reparation for many who blaspheme against him freely, and who do not even remember that a God exists, whom they are obliged to love in return. If they incited me to desperation, in my interior I would say, "I don't care either about hell or about paradise. What I care about is to love my God. This is not the time to think about anything else. Rather, it is the time to love my good God as much as I can. Paradise and hell I place in his hands. He who is so good will give me what is best for me, and will give me a place in which I can glorify him the most." Jesus Christ taught me that the most effective means so that the soul would remain free of any vain apprehension, of any doubt, of any fear, was to protest before heaven, the earth, and the very demons, that she does not want to offend God, even at the cost of her life, and that she does not want to consent to any temptation of the devil. And this as soon as the soul feels the coming of the temptation, in the act of the battle, if she can, and as she begins to feel free, and also during the course of the day. By doing this, the soul will not waste time in thinking about whether she has consented or not, because the mere memory of the protest will already give her calm. And if the devil tries to disturb her, she will be able to answer that if she had the intention of offending God, she would not have protested the opposite. In this way, she will remain free of any fear. Now, who can say the rage of the devil, since all his tricks resolved into confusion for himself, and there, where he thought he would gain, he would lose, and his very temptations and tricks were used by the soul in order to make acts of reparation and love for her God by acting in this way. The other way he taught me in casting away temptations was the following. If they tempted me to suicide, I was to answer, "You have no permission from God. On the contrary, to your annoyance, I want to live, so as to be able to love my God more." If then they beat me and hit me, I was to humble myself, kneel, and thank my God, because this was happening as a penance for my sins. Not only this, but to offer everything as acts of reparation for all the offenses against God that were given in the world. Lastly, an ugly temptation that lasted for a short while was that, after being in continuous contact with demons so ugly for about 1.5 years, I would become pregnant and deliver a little demon with horns. My imagination would breed itself in such a way that I saw myself in a horrible confusion in the face of what people would say about me because of such an awful event. Finally, after about 1.5 years of this fight, the cruelties of the demons ceased, and a whole new life began. Although the demons did not stop molesting me from time to time, however, it was not so frequent, the battle was not so fierce, and I became used to despising them. The new life that began was at the farm called Torre Desperata. One day, while more than ever I had been tormented by the devil, to the point that I felt myself losing my strength and fainting, around evening, while I was in this state, I felt I was having a deadly fit, and I lost consciousness. In that state, I saw Jesus Christ surrounded by many enemies. Some were beating him, some were slapping him, some were driving thorns into his head, some were breaking his legs, some his arms. After they reduced him almost to pieces, they put him in the arms of the Madonna, and this happened not too far from me. After the Most Holy Virgin took him in her arms, she drew near me, and crying, she said to me, "Daughter, see how my son is treated by men, the horrible offenses they commit, which never give him respite. Look at him, how he suffers." And I tried to look at him, and I saw him all blood, all wounds, and almost cut up, reduced to a mortal state. I felt such pains that I would have wanted to die 1,000 times rather than see my Lord suffer so much. I felt ashamed of my little sufferings. The Most Holy Virgin added, but always crying, "Come closer to kiss the wounds of my son. He chooses you as victim, And if many offend him, you, by offering yourself to suffer what he suffers, will give him a relief in so much suffering. Won't you accept? I felt so annihilated. I saw myself so bad, as I am still, and unworthy, that I did not dare to say yes. My nature trembled. I felt so weak from the past pains that it barely left me a thread of life. Then I don't know how, I saw demons yelling and shouting from afar, and that everything I had seen them do to the Lord, they were going to do to me if I accepted. I felt such pains, sufferings, straining of nerves within me, that I thought I was going to leave life. Finally, I drew near and I kissed his wounds. It seemed that after I did that, those limbs, so lacerated, would heal, and the Lord, who before seemed to be almost dead, would begin to revive to new life. Interiorly, I received such lights about the offenses that are given, and attractions to accept being a victim, even if I should suffer 1,000 deaths. For the Lord deserved everything, and I could not oppose what he wanted. This happened while we were in mute silence. But those gazes that we exchanged were as many invitations, as many burning darts that pierced my heart through. The Most Holy Virgin especially spurred me on to accept. But who can say all that I went through? Finally, looking at me benignly, the Lord said to me, "You have seen how much they offend me, and how many walk along the paths of iniquity, and without realizing it, fall into the abyss. Come, to offer yourself before divine justice, as victim of reparation, for the offenses that are given, and for the conversion of sinners, who with eyes closed drink at the poisoned font of sin. A large field of sufferings opens before you, yes, but also of graces. I will never leave you again. I will come within you to suffer all that men do to me, making you share in my pains. For help and comfort, I give you my mother." And he seemed to deliver me to her, and she accepted me. I too offered all of myself to him and to the Virgin, ready to do what he wanted. And this is how it ended the first time. After I came round from that state, I felt such pains, such annihilation of myself, that I saw myself as a miserable little worm that was able to do nothing but crawl on the earth. And I said to the Lord, "Help! Your omnipotence knocks me down. I see that if you do not lift me up, my nothingness is undone and will be dissolved. Give me suffering, but I pray you to give me strength, for I feel myself dying." And so an alternation began of visits from our Lord and of torments on the part of demons. The more I resigned myself, the more they increased their rage. A few days after what is said above, I felt I was losing consciousness again. I remember that at the beginning, every time I felt such a state come to me, I thought I was going to leave life. As I lost consciousness, our Lord made himself seen once again with the crown of thorns on his head, all dripping with blood. And turning to me, he said, "Daughter, take a look at what men do to me. In these sad times, their pride is so great that they have infested all the air, and the stench that spreads everywhere is such that it has reached even before my throne in heaven. They act in such a way as to close heaven by themselves. The miserable ones have no eyes to know the truth, because they are obfuscated by the sin of pride, with the sequel of the other vices which they carry with them. Oh, please give me a relief from so many bitter spasms, and a reparation for so many wrongdoings against me." And in saying this, he removed the crown from himself, which did not look like a crown, but all one piece, such that not even a little portion of the head remained free, but it was all pierced through by those thorns. As he removed the crown, he drew near me and asked me if I accepted it. I felt so annihilated. I felt such pains because of the offenses that are given, that I felt my heart split. I said to him, "Lord, do with me what you want." And so he took it. He drove it onto my head, and he disappeared. Now who can say the spasms I felt when I came back into myself? At each movement of my head, I thought I would breathe my last. So many were the pains and the prickings I felt in my head, in my eyes, in my ears, behind my neck. I felt those thorns penetrate even into my mouth, and it clenched in such a way that I could not open it to take food. So I would remain sometimes 2 days, sometimes 3, without being able to take anything. When they somehow mitigated, I would feel, sensibly, a hand that pressed my head and renewed the pains. And sometimes the spasms were such that I would lose consciousness because of the pain. At the beginning, this would happen on certain days, while on others it wouldn't. When they were repeated, it would be 3 or 4 times a day, and they would last sometimes a quarter of an hour, sometimes half an hour, sometimes 1 hour, and then I would remain free, though feeling very weak and in suffering. I would remain in suffering more or less, depending on how much those pains were communicated to me during that state of dozing. I also remember that since sometimes, because of the sufferings in my head, as I said above, I could not open my mouth in order to take food, and since my family knew that I didn't really want to be in the countryside, when they saw that I was not eating, they would attribute it to a fuss of mine, and naturally they would become irritated. They would get upset and they would mock me. My nature wanted to resent this, because I saw that what they were saying was not true. But the Lord did not want this resentment, and here is how it happened. One evening, while we were at table, and I was in this state of not being able to open my mouth, my family began to get upset. I was so affected that I started to cry, and in order not to be seen, I got up and I went somewhere else, continuing to cry. And I prayed Jesus Christ and the Most Holy Virgin to give me help and strength in order to bear this trial. But as I was doing this, I felt I was beginning to lose consciousness. Oh God, what pain, the mere thought that my family was going to see me, for until then they had not noticed it. At that moment I said, Lord, do not permit that they see me. I was so ashamed to be seen that I myself cannot explain why, and I tried as much as I could to hide in places where I could not be seen. When then I was caught by surprise, in such a way that I would not have the time to hide, or at least to kneel. For whatever position I was in, I would remain in it, and they could say I was there praying. Then I would be found out. As I lost consciousness, our Lord made himself seen in the midst of many enemies who were giving him all sorts of insults. Especially, they grabbed him and trampled him underfoot. They blasphemed him. They pulled his hair. It seemed to me that my good Jesus wanted to escape from under those fetid souls. And he kept looking. Who knows? He might find a friendly hand who would free him. But he found no one. While seeing this, I did nothing but cry over the pains of my Lord. I wanted to go into the midst of those enemies. Who knows, maybe I could free him. But I did not dare to. I said to him, Lord, let me share in your pains. Oh, please, if only I could relieve you and free you. As I was saying this, those enemies, as if they had understood, came against me, but so enraged, and they began to beat me, to pull my hair, to trample me. I had so much fear. I suffered, yes, but within me I was content, because I could see that the Lord was given a little bit of respite. Afterwards, those enemies disappeared, and I remained alone with my Jesus. I tried to compassionate him, but I did not dare to say anything. And he, breaking the silence, said to me, All that you have seen is nothing compared to the offenses that they give me continuously. Their blindness, the engulfing of earthly things, is so great that they reach the point of becoming not only my cruel enemies, but also enemies of themselves. And since their eyes are fixed on the mud, they reach the point of despising the eternal. Who will put an end to so much ingratitude? Who will have compassion for so many people who cost me blood and who live almost buried in the stench of earthly things? Oh, please come with me and pray and cry together with me for so many blind who are all eyes for all that gives of earth, and then despise and trample my graces under their filthy feet as if they were mud. Oh, please lift yourself above all that is earth. Abhor and despise all that does not belong to me. Do not be affected any more by the insults you receive from your family, after you have seen me suffer so much, but take to heart only my honor, the offenses that they give me continuously, the loss of so many souls. Oh, please do not leave me alone in the midst of so many pains that torture my heart. All that you are suffering now is little compared to the pains you will suffer. Have I not always told you that what I want from you is the imitation of my life? Take a look at how dissimilar you are from me. Therefore pluck up courage and do not fear. After this, I returned into myself, and then I realized that I was surrounded by my family. They were crying and were all in distress, and they had such fear that that state might happen again, and especially that I might die, that they brought me back to Corrado as quickly as they could, so that I might be observed by doctors. I can't explain why. I felt such pain at the thought that I was to be visited by doctors, that many times I cried and lamented to the Lord, saying to him, "How many times, O Lord, I prayed you to let me suffer hiddenly? This was my only and sole contentment, and now I am deprived also of this. Oh, please tell me, what shall I do? You alone can help me and relieve me in my affliction. Don't you see how many things they say? One thinks in one way, one in another. One wants to have one remedy applied on me and one another. They are all eyes over me, in such a way that they give me no more peace. Oh, please help me in so many pains, for I feel life failing me." And the Lord benignly added, "Do not want to afflict yourself because of this. What I want from you is that you abandon yourself as though dead in my arms. Until you keep your eyes opened to look at what I am doing, and not at what the creatures do and say, I cannot operate freely upon you. Don't you want to trust me? Don't you know how much I love you, and that everything I allow, either through creatures or on the part of demons, or directly from me, is for your true good and serves for nothing other than to lead the soul to that state for which I have chosen her? Therefore, I want you to remain in my arms with your eyes closed, without looking at and investigating this or that, trusting me completely and letting me operate freely. If then you want to do the opposite, you will lose much time and will come to oppose what I want to do with you. As for creatures, use profound silence. Be benign and submissive with everyone. Let your life, your breath, your thoughts and affections be continuous acts of reparations to placate my justice, offering me, along with them, the bothers from creatures, which will not be few. After this, I did as much as I could to resign myself to the will of God, although many times I was put in such constraints by creatures that at times I would do nothing but cry. The time also came to have me visited by the doctor, and he judged that it was nothing other than a nervous issue. So he prescribed medicines, distractions, strolls, cold baths. He recommended to my family that they watch well over me when I was surprised by that state, because, he said, if you move her, you can break her, but not fix her. Since when I was surprised by that state, I would remain petrified. So a war arose on the part of my family. They prevented me from going to church. They no longer gave me that freedom to be by myself. I was watched everywhere, and so they noticed it more often. Many times I lamented to the Lord, saying to him, "My good Jesus, how my pains have increased! I am deprived also of the things dearest to me, which are the sacraments." I had never thought I would reach this point, but who knows where I will end up? Oh, please give me help and strength, for my nature is failing me. Many times he would deign to tell me a few words. He would say to me, "I am your help. What do you fear? Don't you remember that I too suffered from all kinds of people? Some had one opinion about me, some another. The holiest things I did were judged by them as faulty, wicked, to the point of telling me that I was possessed. So much so that they would look at me with surly eyes. They would keep me in their midst, but unwillingly, and would plot among themselves on how they could take my life away the soonest, for my presence had become intolerable for them. So, don't you want me to make you similar to me by making you suffer on the part of creatures? So I spent several years suffering on the part of creatures, from demons, and directly from God. At times I reached such bitterness from creatures, and from the way they thought, that I was ashamed of being seen by anyone. So much so, that my greatest sacrifice was to appear in the midst of people. The blushing and the confusion were such that I felt dazed. There were more visits from other doctors, but they came up with nothing. Sometimes, shedding bitter tears, I would say to him with all my heart, "Lord, how public my sufferings have become, not only to my family, but also to strangers. I see myself all covered with confusion. It seems to me that everyone is pointing his finger at me, as if these sufferings were the most wicked actions. I myself am unable to say what has happened to me. Oh, please, you alone can free me from such publicity, and let me suffer hiddenly. I pray you, I implore you, answer me." Sometimes the Lord too showed he would not listen to me, and my pains would increase. Other times then, he would compassionate me, telling me, "Poor daughter, come to me, for I want to console you. You are right that you suffer, but don't you remember that I too? Oh, how much more I suffered. Up to a certain point, my pains remained hidden, but when the will of the Father came for me to suffer in public, promptly I went out to meet confusions, opprobrium, scorns, to the point of being stripped naked in the midst of a most numerous people. Could you imagine a confusion greater than this? My nature greatly felt these kinds of sufferings, but I had my gaze fixed on the will of the Father, and I offered these pains in reparation for many who committed the most wicked actions publicly, with open eyes, boasting about them without the slightest blush. I would say to him, "Father, accept my confusions and opprobrium in reparation for many who have the insolence to offend you so freely, without the slightest sorrow. Forgive them. Give them light, that they may see the ugliness of sin and convert. I want to make you too share in these kinds of sufferings. Don't you know that the most beautiful presents I can give to the souls I love are crosses and pains? You are still a little girl in the way of the cross. This is why you feel too weak. Once you have grown up and have known how precious suffering is, then you will feel stronger. Therefore lean on me. Rest, for in this way you will acquire strength. After I spent some time in this state mentioned above, about 6 or 7 months, the sufferings increased more, to the point that I was forced to stay in bed. Often that state of losing consciousness multiplied, to the point that I would almost not have 1 hour free. I reduced myself to a state of extreme weakness. My mouth clenched in such a way that I could not open it at all, and in the few free moments I would have, I was able to take just a few drops of some drink, if I managed at all. And then I was forced to bring it up, because of the continuous vomiting which I have always had. After I remained about 18 days in this continuous state, they sent for the confessor, so that I could confess. When the confessor came, he found me in that state of dozing. When I came round, he asked me what was wrong with me. Keeping silent about all the rest, and since at that time the troubles of the demons and the visits of our Lord continued, I only said to him, "Father, it is the devil." He said to me, "Do not be afraid, for it is not the devil, and if it is, Father will free you." So giving me the obedience, and marking me with the sign of the cross, and helping me to loosen my arms, for I felt my whole body petrified, as if it had become one single piece, he managed to restore the motion of my arms, and to let me open my mouth, which before had been unmovable to everything. I attributed this to the sanctity of my confessor, who was truly a holy priest. I held this almost as a miracle, so much so that I would say to myself, "See, I was prepared to die, because I really felt ill, and if that state had lasted, I believe I would have left life." However, I remember that I was resigned, and that when I saw myself free, I felt a certain regret for not having died. Then, after the confessor went away and I remained free, I returned to the state of before. And so it happened that I spent sometimes 1 week, sometimes 15 days, and even months, being surprised by that state every now and then during the day, and I was able to free myself by myself. But when I was found out very frequently, as I said before, my family would then send for the confessor, more so since they had seen that the first time I had been freed, while everyone believed that I would never again recover from that state. But then I went down to church, and I returned to that state again, and so they would send for the confessor, and then I would be freed. However, it had never crossed my mind that it would take the priest to free me from such a state, or that my malady was an extraordinary thing. It is true that when I would lose consciousness, I could see Jesus Christ, but I attributed this to the goodness of our Lord, and would say to myself, "See how good the Lord is toward me, that he comes to give me strength in this state of sufferings. Otherwise, how could I endure it? Who would give me the strength?" It is also true that when such a state was going to occur, in the morning, at communion, he would tell me. And in that very state, the sufferings would come to me from he himself. But I would pay attention to none of this. At the mere thought sometimes of telling this to the confessor, I felt I was the proudest soul that existed in the world if I dared to open my mouth to speak of these things, of seeing Jesus Christ. And I would feel such blushing that it was impossible to say anything to that confessor, as good and holy as he was. It was so true that I did not think that it would take the priest to free me, but that this was happening because of the sanctity of my confessor, that when the time came that he went away to the countryside, one morning after communion, the Lord made me understand that I was going to be surprised by that state, inviting me to keep him company by sharing in his pains. And I immediately said to him, "Lord, how am I going to do this? The confessor is not here. Who is going to free me? Maybe you want to make me die now." And the Lord just told me, "Your trust must be only in me. Be resigned, because resignation renders the soul luminous, and it keeps all other passions in their place, in such a way that, attracted by those rays of light, I go into that soul, and I transform her completely into myself, and I make her live of my own life." I resigned myself to his holy will. I offered that communion as the last one of my life, and I gave the last goodbye to Jesus in the sacrament. But though resigned, I felt my nature so much that for that whole day I did nothing but cry and pray the Lord to give me strength. In truth, that situation turned out to be so very bitter to me, and without thinking or knowing, I found myself with a new and heavy cross, such that I believe it has been the heaviest I have had in my life. While I was in that state of sufferings, as for me, I would think of nothing but dying and doing the will of God. On the part of my family, which also suffered in seeing me in that state, they tried to send for some priest, but one would not come because of this, another because of that. After 10 days came the confessor who used to confess me when I was little, and it happened that he too was able to make me come round from that state. Then I realized the net in which the Lord had wrapped me. From here, a war arose against me on the part of priests. Some would say that it was a pretense, some that beating was needed, others that I wanted to make myself believed a saint. Some would add that I was possessed, and many other things, such that if I wanted to tell them all, the story would be too long. So with these ideas in their minds, when the sufferings would occur and my family would send for one of them, they would have such strange reactions that my poor family suffered very much, especially my poor mamma. How many tears she shed for me. O Lord, reward her, you yourself. O my good Lord, how much I suffered on this side. You alone know everything. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 1, Part 3. Fiat.